Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Psalms and Psychology. I'm Zach here with the most incredible host in the world, Mrs. Reema Angelique. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. How are you?
I'm really good. As always, I'm excited to get into this episode. I love hearing you speak.
Oh, well, thank you.
All right, so would you like to tell everyone what we're talking about?
Yeah, so we'll be talking about OCD, and I think we're going to go a little bit into religious OCD. I think that's actually the main topic of today.
Oh, really? What do you mean by religious OCD?
So, OCD can take on thousands of different themes in somebody's life, but religious OCD is a very common one, so that's what we'll be talking about. Let's start us off with our psalm. So I'm going to get into Psalm 94, verse 19. It says, "When anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy." I love that because when I first was reading this verse, I was thinking about not only anxiety, but when doubts were great within me, just anything that goes against the word, when they were great within me, when I wasn't, because the thing about OCD that we'll really be getting into is that it's like a self-doubt disorder in and of itself. And so that was a great verse to kind of open up for talking about OCD, really.
No, yeah, I love that. I really do. All right, I'm excited. Let's go.
Okay, well, Zach, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever, and you can be honest about this, I won't judge you or whatever, but have you ever been driving in the car and you felt like you may have hit somebody, but you didn't even go over a bump or anything?
You know what? That's actually crazy because I zone out so bad when I'm driving, and I'll come back into my body like 10 minutes later, and I'm just like, whoa, what have I been doing these last 10 minutes? I don't remember anything.
Yeah, but that's different. Do you ever think that you hit somebody in your car?
Like, actually, well, sometimes I'm thinking, well, did I hit somebody? Maybe.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like it. Or do you ever go through the grocery store and think that you might have stolen something that you're just not aware of might be in your pants?
All right, no, that is not me.
Okay, do you ever go back into the house to check your straightener, to check the stove? Well, you don't have a straightener. Your hair curling iron?
Well, no, I don't do that, but I do check to make sure the door is shut and locked.
How many times a day?
Every time I leave.
Okay, well, that's just being safe. That's good. One time I was at Wegmans recently, and I don't know if I told you this, but the manager walked up to me. It wasn't recently, it was like a year ago. But he was like, "I saw you back there stealing.
Whoa.
And I'm going to get you," or something.
Oh, what are you doing at Wegmans?
I was there at night alone. And did I tell you about this?
No, what happened?
That's all that happened. He just said, "I caught you stealing." And then I was like, "What?" And I got like my heart was beating out of my chest because I already have a fear of like accidentally stealing something. And he was like, I'm just playing. And I was like, "You can't do that to me. I have OCD." And I was laughing. But I realized in that moment, that guy probably might not even know what OCD really is. Because people think OCD is, "Oh, I'm just really clean and tidy." So he's probably like, "She's clean? What does she mean by that?"
What does that matter?
Yeah, so I don't know what that guy knows or doesn't know. But I have another story of a time that when I really wanted control over my own life, I was just really stressed out. And I lived with my dad. So remember, I went to UNF for undergrad, and I was staying with my dad for a summer because I was a resident assistant, and we would get free housing. But over the summer, we wouldn't. You'd have to reapply and do like summer school too. And I just didn't want to do that. So I went and lived with my dad about 40 minutes away, and I would check every day that I wouldn't use the stove ever. I don't cook, but I would leave the house and I would be like down the road or sometimes 40 minutes away. I'd turn around and go back to his house to check, was the stove off and was the straightener off? And it got so bad that it became counterproductive. Like, I'm trying to be safe, but guess what I did?
You just,
my dad texted me and said, "Hey, did you leave my front door open?" I had left his front door open all day. So in the pursuit of being safe to quote unquote, like make sure that the oven was off or whatever, or the stove and my straightener was off, I was so stressed out that I wasn't even living anymore. I left his door open.
So you're just missing the obvious?
Yeah. So I missed the obvious in pursuit of all the small little details.
Ooh.
Yeah. So those are things and common intrusive thoughts that you can have in OCD. Now, obviously, I'm my own person, so I have my own, but I do have a little list of common ones, so we're going to go through them.
All right, let's hear them.
All right, so like I said, the fear of like, oh, what if I hit somebody with my car? Or the worry of losing control and hurting someone intentionally even though you don't have a desire to do so. So an intrusive thought is basically a thought that pops up in your mind that's outside of you. It's not something that you put there. It's something that just hits you. 99% of the population actually have intrusive thoughts.
Oh, wow. I did not realize it was that prevalent.
Yes, it's just what you do with it. So for example, there's a contamination or health-related intrusive thoughts that people get, like, oh, I might have some dormant cancer in me, or I might have something in my body parts, like something wrong.
This is the Quora section. I feel like everyone hits up Quora and Reddit, and they just start listing all of their complaints about their body.
Yeah, we could probably find a bunch of OCD people in Reddit and Quora. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the worry about being exposed to germs. So I knew somebody who, when we went to restaurants, they only got like plastic silverware and things of that sort. So yeah, it's like the fear of coming into it's a fear of coming into contact with bad germs.
Like germophobia? Or
Yeah.
is this like a new level of germophobia?
It's like similar to it, yeah. And then doubts like, did I forget to wash my hands? Or fear of accidentally poisoning someone through improper food handling. So maybe they're the cook or they're the chef and they're scared that maybe, I know people where they might have a drink on them and then they think, oh, is there something poisonous in this drink randomly that I accidentally spilled in this drink, and is it going to kill me? And it goes down this whole rabbit hole.
That sucks.
I know. And then, so you got sexual intrusive thoughts. Some people get, I know it's crazy, but like disturbing sexual thoughts that are out of character, unwanted, like inappropriate attractions. I know there are some Christians where they're like, what if I'm gay and I don't know it? And they just have a fear of being gay, or like something, what if I feel an attraction to a man or a woman? But it's like inappropriate fears, or irrational fears. I mean, like it's not really coming from anywhere. It's just happening. And they're like, what if I am? What if? But it's not actually happening. So then there's like a fear of acting on these thoughts, or the desire, or like, like I was saying, like there's a fear that what if I want to do that? And it's like, it goes against, usually it's something that goes against your moral code. Like, for example, if you have violent thoughts, intrusive thoughts, it's like, it can be even more disturbing, especially if you care about people and it's not in your nature. Why did I just have this fear of hurting somebody? Like, there's a lot of women, when I worked at the psych hospital, who would come in and they would have postpartum OCD, where they would have these like visions of, oh, what if I took this knife and hurt my kid? And they're like, oh, somebody needs to hide the knives from me. But it wasn't that they actually were ever going to act on it. It was just like they couldn't believe that fear was coming into them. And what I think that has to do with is, I think OCD will affect the things you really care about. Or maybe even intrusive thoughts, they will attack the things that you truly care about.
No, definitely.
So yeah, they look at your morals, and that kind of goes into religious intrusive thoughts. Like, obviously, if you're a religious or a moral person, you might have like thoughts of blasphemy that come into your head. Have you ever heard of that one?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, what do you mean by thoughts of blasphemy?
It could be like anything that's like going against God. It could be like, what if I'm secretly on the devil's side? Or,
oh wow.
I hate, saying you hate religious figures, or even depictions of religious figures in very inappropriate situations.
Oh. Okay. Yeah, I can't say I have that, but
yeah, no. Have you
I can't
ever heard
imagine.
of it?
I have not actually heard of that. No,
Yeah.
I didn't realize it got to that level.
Yeah, and it does. And some people might be listening to this, and maybe even you thought of it. Is that spiritual warfare? Because it sounds like there could be an element of it that is spiritual warfare in a way.
I could definitely see that.
Because these are coming from the outside of you and entering your mind. And while I don't right now have an answer to if that is spiritual warfare, I think it could be. It totally could be. If you rebuke it, and you, like we said in the past, if you rebuke, fast, and pray, and these things don't go away, it might have something mental. There might be a mental component here. So we're not going to over spiritualize in this podcast, but we're not always going to just say everything is mental illness, because it's not ever that. We have to keep a balance here. So anyway, another thing, intrusive thoughts, like I was saying at the beginning, they impact 99% of the population, but OCD only impacts about 1 to 2% of the world. In other words, we all have them. They only affect some people in certain ways.
So what would someone with OCD have differently than just regular intrusive thoughts? That's
a great question. So somebody with OCD, their intrusive thoughts drive compulsions.
Okay, so like, does it make them actually act on it, or is it just that they're worried? They just can't stop worrying about doing it.
So sometimes the compulsion, there's two different kinds of compulsions, and this actually goes into where we're going to talk about myths for OCD and like debunking some myths. So there's like the compulsions that are in your head. People don't talk about those. Compulsions can happen in your head. A compulsion is basically just something that you engage in to make that intrusive thought go away. So your compulsion could be mental compulsions or it could be physical. So here's some examples of compulsions. Hand picking, checking things, cleaning, washing your hands, counting. And here's a crazy one. Hoarding. You can be a hoarder and also have OCD. It's not always about like being clean.
Yeah, because that's like the common stereotype is that, oh, if I like to have my place spotless clean, I'm so OCD. And it's like, no, that is not really OCD. I mean, it could be, but not necessarily.
Yeah, well, you could have compulsive tendencies and a compulsive personality style, but it doesn't always mean OCD. And a compulsive personality style is somebody who's rigid or perfectionistic and likes to live by the rules or detail-oriented.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so you could be compulsive, but it doesn't mean you're OCD, because if somebody's OCD, that means they have an intrusion, and then they have that compulsion. And the compulsion is meant to provide relief. But just like a lot of things in life, it's a false sense of relief. It's like an addiction.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot.
Yes, and it's going to come back. So yeah, like I said, 2% of the world has OCD, and so that's a lot different than the 99%. And like I was saying earlier, and we'll get into this with the myths. So let's talk a little bit about myths for OCD, because I know our culture is very into self-diagnosis and just like, I don't know where these things come from, a lot of these ideas, but a lot of people have their ideas about OCD if it means that, oh, I'm so clean, but there's a lot. It's not all about being clean. It's not all about being perfectionistic. And actually, like I was saying, it might give you a false sense of perfectionism. Like I was saying at my dad's house, I had this perfectionistic, it might have looked perfectionistic, but really I was missing the big picture. I wasn't detail-oriented at all. I was missing the biggest thing was closing the door. Like it can be debilitating. It can keep you from actually living your life. So this is a lot different than a compulsive personality type. This is a lot different than obsessive compulsive personality disorder. That's a big difference. And we can do a whole podcast on obsessive compulsive personality disorder, but that's basically a disorder where individuals have this rigid adherence to rules, order, and control in their lives. And it's usually a lot more pervasive than OCD, and it's honestly, okay, both of them you can be born with, but I'd say probably OCPD, the personality style, you'd be more likely to be born with. And it's probably something that is less likely to change about a person. With OCD, there's hope and there's healing, and we'll get into that. And I'm not saying there isn't hope for obsessive compulsive personality, but it's just a lot different. It's more pervasive. And they often view their behavior as correct, and they may not feel distressed about like the intrusive stuff. Like they might not feel as much distress. It's just a way of life for them, and it can cause a lot of interpersonal problems in their lives. I also saw in the DSM-5 TR, one of the symptoms of obsessive compulsive personality style is they actually keep things they don't need, which goes into the hoarding thing, which I thought was interesting. They also might be overcorrective in life. Like you might be talking to them and they just correct everything you say, and it's like a compulsion for them. It's just part of their personality style. So being compulsive could be a style of personality. It's more about the personality traits. And then OCD is this debilitating obsession and compulsions that take over them. So a person with a personality type of like a compulsive personality type might enjoy tidying their desk, but somebody with OCD might feel like this overwhelming anxiety and compulsively clean due to like maybe fears of contamination or whatever intrusive thought that they're having. So those are things to keep in mind. Another myth about OCD is what we already touched on. Compulsions are not always going to be visible. So they can be in your head, such as ruminating for hours on hours on hours. So I personally have dealt with this before, where I'll go to Zach and I'll seek reassurance from him about the same thing going on. It's like the same issue in my head over and over and over again. And my intrusive thought is something that's distressing me and my anxiety, but then I go to him and my compulsion is getting him to tell me like it's all going to be okay.
Yeah, and I've noticed that doesn't work.
It doesn't work, so it frustrates your partner. It frustrates the people in your life, maybe even your pastor, who you're going to, and then the pastor gives you the spiritual truth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, this is what God's word says, and then you're still going back every time saying you need more and more and more.
Yeah, and it sounds like a nightmare. I mean, just not being able to have any assurance ever, always being on edge. It sounds horrible.
Oh, it definitely is. Yes.
And I'm very sorry that you actually experienced that. And that definitely makes me want to be a lot more understanding in the moment.
Well, and we'll even talk a little bit about what are ways that you can help somebody, because it can damage, I hate to say it, but it can damage interpersonal relationships. For example, let me talk a little bit about the ways that relationships can be affected by somebody when somebody has OCD. One way is people with OCD can, and these aren't for everybody. I mean, this doesn't apply to every single person, but people with OCD, they might have a sense of high standards in relationships or even expect perfectionism. That's because they're projecting outwardly the way that they feel within. That's why nothing's ever right for them to other people, because to them, nothing's ever right. There's this need for perfection. There's a need to fit their rigid moral expectations or standards. And so it can be very frustrating when loved ones are around this, because it's like, I feel like nothing I do with this person is enough. But I'm just really curious, and this is off script, but do you feel that way? Like nothing's ever enough?
For you?
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Okay.
not really. Not with you. You don't come across like that. Like, I can see, like, where you're going with this. Like, let's say, like a child that has an OCD parent, and that parent is maybe obsessively watching over them, won't let them leave. I can see how that could be very draining on the child, but at the same time, the parent, they're struggling with something. It's not that they're doing this because they want to just make your life hell or torture you. It's just it's something they struggle with.
Okay, that's good. That's good. And what you might also notice with people who have compulsive personality types, it's really hard for them to express emotion. They might focus on fixing problems rather than providing like emotional support. Emotional expression may feel uncomfortable for them. And sometimes they might lean more practical in matters. And this isn't everybody, because like I don't know if that even applies to me. But sometimes you can see if somebody's compulsive, though, sometimes by lack of affect on their face or lack of showing of emotions. But that also might tie into the fear of vulnerability. A lot of people with these personality types might avoid open, vulnerable conversations due to fear of saying the wrong thing or being misunderstood. They always want to do things perfectly, and emotions are unpredictable, and they're not perfect. It's hard to keep composure and control when you're showing emotion, and so it's really hard. Also, people with these personality types might have a need for control, or they might be overly rigid, and they might not seem flexible in their way of thinking, often wanting things done the right way because they have their own convictions and moral standards. So if you guys can see that this ties into what we're going to be talking about with the religious OCD. I wanted to give an overview of some, like actually just OCD in general, but if you can see, there's this moral, like I could see probably anecdotally, and I haven't seen too much research on this, but I'm sure I would find it if I looked, but I'm sure people with OCD are more likely to want to seek out religious establishments and a religious institution for which they could live their life by, because it would make sense that it would fit with their standard. And I would even wonder if they would want to go toward Catholicism or something like that, because it does provide you very rigid rules and a sense of belonging into this institution that kind of can feel legalistic at times.
Well, do you think that they like the structured?
The structure, and it provides them that place, like a peaceful way. A nice way of structure, but I don't know. That's just anecdotal, and that's just what I'm thinking in this moment.
No, it definitely makes sense, though.
Okay, yeah, and then they might also have difficulty trusting people, which I think is a common human phenomenon. I don't even know if that's just OCD. Obviously, it's not. But just a reluctance to give tasks to other people as well, like delegating.
Yeah, they want to make sure they do it themselves.
Yeah,
You're
laughing.
not going to touch it.
I'm laughing because I do that to Zach every day. It's like, I can do it. I got it.
I'm like, please just let me help you out. You have so much on your plate. No, I can't do that.
Yeah.
No, I have to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure that can go into childhood trauma too. Just self-sufficiency, like dependency needs. independency.
I think you just don't want to make me feel like I have to do anything. It's like you want to take care of me to a point where I'm like, you don't need to take care of me. Like, I should be taking care of you more than you take care of me.
Honestly, it's because I have my rigid ways of doing it, though.
Oh, so you just don't want me to mess it up?
Like when you want to help me on Instagram, I can't let you help
No,
me.
well, no, that's different.
Well,
yeah, that's you creating. Like, I could never do what you do.
Oh, thanks.
I just mean like helping you like with posting stuff that you make.
Oh,
just so you don't have to sit there and post everything.
Yeah, that's really hard too.
Yeah, definitely. It's not about you have your style. I don't think anyone can completely copy what you're doing.
Yes, and then also what you find, like let's talk a strength really quick, because I was thinking about strengths of people with OCD. One thing is apparently they can be deeply loyal and responsible people at times, so they can be very reliable, dependable, and they're ride or dies. They can be ride or dies for you.
Well, see, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, they take commitment seriously. You know, they're probably really good at getting work done. They do. On the flip side of that, it's hard to relax, which isn't a good thing. You know, we're supposed to take our Sabbath day of rest. But what I think about them is if I'm working with an OCD person, they're just like, I want to please God so bad, and I'm just so aware that I don't measure up. And I think there's strength in the humility. I believe that there's so much strength in that humility because we all should be aware of that. I think maybe people with OCD are a little too aware of that in the sense that they try to become their own saviors. But, should we even talk about that? I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about that because I think OCD is a need to be your own savior. And I might be calling you out, but I'm calling myself out because I think I do take the control into my own hands. But we'll talk about how to heal from it. It's not only that, but I will be honest about that. That is how I feel about it.
No, sometimes you have to let God take control.
Yes, and OCD is an inherent need for control.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to just let it go. And honestly, it'll help you out a lot more when you get to that level. Exactly.
Okay, so what are some ways that OCD can come up in a religious context? Let's talk a little bit about this. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but there's a name for this. It's called scrupulosity. It's this can appear as most of your thoughts and compulsions being about your faith. So I've looked into some research on this because I know the things in my head, but I wanted to get some real research for you guys. So I'm looking at Himlay 2011, Himlay et al. 2011. They did a study on OCD, religious OCD. At first, I was looking for a study that I was honestly trying to find is there a link between maybe rigid forms of religion and scrupulosity? And I don't know if it said the research was mixed, as with so many things. The research is always mixed on so many things. So it didn't say for sure on this article or anything like that, but it did give great information on what religious OCD is and then how to heal from it. It also gave a really great breakdown of the core thoughts and beliefs that are underlying somebody with religious OCD, so we can talk about what are the core beliefs that are going on so you can begin to heal and change. So this is actually one of the most common and impairing OCD problems related to religion. It would involve like repetitive blasphemous thoughts, which we talked about earlier. So it's like accounts of troubling, unwanted, and intrusive religious thoughts and thinking. And this actually dates back, they're saying, to the 16th century. I mean, these things have been going on for a really long time. And the obsessions can include, like I was alluding to earlier, or talking about, like, obscenities related to religious figures, thoughts of sexual activities involving religious figures. Just things that are just very not from within you, and they just hit you. And for some people, it's like, what the heck was that? And for some people, they're like, oh, I'm just gonna let that go. That was not me. That was weird. Just shake it off and keep going. But for some people who are morally rigid, they might have a sense of responsibility on them, like, I must have done something, or that must be mine. And how do I get rid of this? And that's what the whole thing of OCD is trying to get rid of these uncomfortable things. And so clinical impressions suggest, so it's saying in this article, that some individuals with OCD also report limited distress associated with their initial blasphemous thoughts, only to experience a growing distress as they become more common and explicit. So something I tell my patients, and I didn't make this up, this came from ACT. So it's kind of like an intrusive thought, if you're trying to hide it. it's kind of like taking a beach ball and putting it under the water. And you're holding the beach ball under the water. You can do it for a minute or something, but it's gonna come back up really fast and hit you.
No, definitely.
That's what you do when you suppress your thoughts and emotions. They're going to come up stronger. So when you have these intrusive thoughts and you're just suppressing them, let's say they're actually distressing, but you're just putting them under the surface like that beach ball, it's going to come back up and hit you. It's not good. So, it was saying, so others might experience severe distress when thoughts first occur, and at least in part because of the belief that having these thoughts are sinful, and that these negative religious thoughts must be controlled. So some people, of course, they're going to use prayer as a compulsion to stop the intrusive thoughts, which the Bible always tells us to pray without ceasing anyway, which makes sense. But these prayers, it's showing that in the research that the prayers ultimately right away start to provide relief. And then with time, they need more prayer and more prayer and more prayer and more prayer. And then they're debilitated and they're not even living their lives anymore because they're doing a bunch of prayers. And also some people, they do like the Hail Marys. I'm not so like into what goes on in Catholicism. Like I'm not really very aware of it, but I do know there's things that they can do, like these rituals, not only prayer. It becomes like real rituals to complete, to write off your sin, because they believe that these thoughts are sinful. And so the person with OCD starts to doubt that what they have done is enough. Because it's a self-doubt disorder, they start to believe, oh, I haven't given God enough prayer. I haven't given God enough of these rituals that I'm doing to show him I'm sorry and I'm repentant for what I've been doing or what I've been thinking about or what's been hitting me, which obviously can impact relationships because they become always needy and they have this like self-assurance, or they need this self-assurance from other people and their family. They might seek out their pastors or people around in the church to help them. So yeah, those are things. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, but so when we're thinking about how to heal from these things, so the article obviously talks about the gold standards of treatment. The gold standards of treatment are exposure response prevention therapy and cognitive therapy. So for exposure response prevention therapy, it's basically facing the fear. So usually you're going to go into real or imagined exposure. So if it's something that you could actually face, you might have to start to face it. There's like a ladder that you would do, like a hierarchy exposure that you would do. You'd work your way up. It's very distressing and can really hurt people if you just make them face their fear head on like that. But it's like working your way up toward the fear. And so it might be something you have to imagine, or it might be something that you have to actually face. So it just depends on what it is. Therapists have to get very creative in this department because it depends on what it is. You can't face everything. Like, for example, I'm afraid of fire. How are we going to face that? I guess like lighting a candle or doing a campfire, but I can't be caught on fire.
Yeah,
you know,
they're
that's
not just
going to
light you up.
Yeah, no, they're not going to light me up. Although they might want to.
Sometimes.
Yeah. But, so the thing about that is, for example, this could be, so how would you expose yourself to an intrusive thought? You could make a list, and I know this sounds crazy because list making can be a compulsion, but part of this treatment could be making a list of the thoughts that keep coming up. So instead of just trying to hold that beach ball under the water, making a list of, okay, here are the intrusive thoughts I'm having. And do you know how freeing that could be? Because then you start to confront, okay, this actually just happened. But it's not, I'm not saying they're I'm not saying they're your thoughts, but at least allowing yourself to face that they're coming up, because if you try to ignore them or avoid them, and it's going to come back up and it's going to hurt you. So you might also have to be exposed maybe to some stimuli that bring up the intrusive thoughts or compulsions for you, and you start to work through that in therapy. So the other one too was cognitive therapy, which it can kind of get to the root of what you're experiencing and getting like to the root of those core beliefs. So let's talk a few beliefs that are underlying religious OCD. Okay. So a lot of people with religious OCD cannot handle uncertainty. They feel like they have a need to know, and they don't know whether their sins will, be forgiven. And that's a fear for them, is not knowing, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough to make sure that my fears, am I doing enough to make sure that my sins are being washed away? Which already sounds theologically wrong, but it's just something that's in their brain. And a second belief is the high relevance or over importance of one's thoughts. Somebody with religious OCD might really believe that their thoughts can control, that their thoughts are just, it's a huge burden on them. They believe that their thoughts have so much power. And so here's the thing. Our thoughts hold a lot of power. I mean, the Bible says be transformed by the renewing of your mind. But with somebody with a religious OCD, I mean, they believe that their thoughts can control people. It's like a magical kind of thinking that comes up. And they just believe that even their own intrusive thoughts hold so much power over them. But it only holds enough power as you let it. So if you let them pass by, and we'll talk about this in more of the healing stuff, but we're talking about core beliefs right now. But if you let them pass by, that's a different story. So we'll talk about how you can do that. But let's get into the third belief. The third belief that this article outlines is that there's this overimportance of controlling thoughts. So it's not even the overimportance of thoughts, but it's this need to control the thoughts that they're having. And so people in this situation believe that if they were simply strong enough or Christian enough, and that they loved God enough, that they could succeed in purifying their thinking and controlling their intrusions. So it's like they might even have people in their lives who are telling them, just, you need to be closer to God, or you need to do this and that. And so it just drives more shame. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm not good enough. I'm not a good enough Christian. And so there's also this inflated sense of responsibility just in life over one's surroundings. And then there's this overestimation of threat. It shows that people believe that these intrusive thoughts could kind of take away their salvation. So a lot of people, they might be uncertain of, honestly, about their salvation, if they were even saved in the first place. And so I might get like questions from people a lot that I've seen online, a ton of like, how do I know I'm saved? And it will be people who believe that they were once saved, or maybe not. They're just not sure of what salvation even is and if they have attained it, because they at one point did think they knew, but it feels like they're just too bad to really ever attain it. And so they think they may have lost it, some people. And in my theology is that you can't lose if you truly have it, you can't lose it, because there's nothing you could do to gain it. So how could you lose it? But this is just a core fear with somebody who has a religious OCD, or it can be a core fear. So another treatment that can work wonders, it comes from acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's called Leaves on a Stream. But if you adapt that religiously, it's like having the intrusive thoughts, and they're like on a stream, and they're on leaves, and they're passing by, and you allow them to go. You say, oh, I see you. You're nothing more than a mind fart, and you're just moving through. And so that can be powerful. What also I like to do is, instead of the leaves on a stream, let's let it fall at the cross. Let's look at the cross. So what I do is I pray, you can open your hands, and you release, and you say, I'm letting this off at the cross. Because I know that I'm not going to be able to cast this out myself. I'm not going to be able to cast this intrusive thought out on my own strength, and it's really bothering me. But I'll let you take it from me, because God, you already know my thoughts. And that is how you allow him he takes it from you. And because we can't, so I see OCD as a way of us trying to cover our own sins or become our own savior, because we're like, is my compulsion good enough? Am I doing enough? But Jesus is enough. And that's what you have to remember. But also keep grace for yourself. Give yourself grace, and remember that God has grace for you. But OCD tries to act as a savior, in a sense, of covering of your own sins. And we have to remember, so what I realize with people who have OCD, they think that one little thing they say to somebody could, or even think about somebody, could change that person's life in such a way, and they have such a responsibility on them. Like, I remember I used to think, oh, if I mess up in front of these people, if I was hanging out with a bunch of non-believers, I would think, oh, well, if I mess up here, they're going to have a bad image of Jesus. And I just had all this fear in me. And on the one hand, it says, yeah, it's really bad to lead people astray. But what I think about in this case is I think about in the book of Job, where he had all the friends who were saying these things that weren't correct, right? But then he had the one friend who was the most right, Elihu, and God raised him up. And the funny part about that is God raised this guy up. He was young. He didn't actually know. He didn't really truly know he wasn't exactly all right.
He wasn't 100% correct.
He got some things wrong, but God still exalted him because he had a heart for God.
He had a righteous answer.
And so it shows you that you can make mistakes. You can make some mistakes. And actually, it says in the book of Romans, all have fallen short. We all make mistakes.
Mm-hmm. But that's 100%. Yeah. That's what you're right. We all do fall short every single day. So to put it on us, yeah, you're never going to be satisfied with how you're never going to be satisfied. But that's why when you turn and look at God,
we're not perfect, and God doesn't expect us to be. In fact, the gospel would be null and void if we were perfect on our own. So OCD makes us way too responsible for our own salvation. The question is, who are you trusting with your salvation? Who are you trusting? Are you trusting in yourself? Are you trusting in Jesus? Because but I want to say, it is so commendable that you want to please God and love God so much that you are caught up about your own sin. I think that is beautiful in this day and age. That is so commendable that you care that much, that people care that much, that they don't know if they're doing the right thing. I think most of the world doesn't have that. I think you should be, I'm not saying develop pride, but I'm proud of you. I think having that is so beautiful in this world. And so, but the Lord wants to meet us where we are and take that burden away and take care of our salvation. And it's my belief, and I've read a good bit of the Bible, and I'm a non-denominational, and I just believe what the Bible says. And it's my belief that you can't really lose salvation because God is the one who gifts it to us as a free gift. It says in Ephesians 2:8. So nobody can boast about it. We don't earn it. You can't earn it, which is humbling, and it's a reminder that we need Him to cover us and cover our sin. So I think too, when we talk about spiritual warfare, and I know we can get kind of caught up in what is spiritual warfare and what isn't, and it sounds like in some ways some of these blasphemous thoughts could be spiritual warfare. And it really could be, but I don't believe we would always truly know. We don't always truly know for sure. So what we would do in that case is we need to put on the armor of God always and make sure that we're praying to the Lord and allowing Him to take care of us. It really could be spiritual warfare, but at the same time, I think intrusive thoughts are so common that we don't really have to get fully caught up in saying like, OCD doesn't exist. No, it definitely exists. And mental illness definitely exists, and these are patterns and ways that humans have dealt with issues for many, many years. And like we were saying, it was even dating back to the 16th century. Like, we've had these issues coming up for years, so we might as well not shame ourselves and say, it doesn't exist, it's just the devil. Like, we don't really know for sure. Also, we've seen, and the research was showing, there's differences in brains. There's differences in the brains of people with OCD. It's biological as well. And so they're showing that. Like, the studies are showing there's brain differences, especially those with PTSD. People with PTSD are more likely to have intrusive thoughts. And sometimes these can relate to the things that they've been through. And intrusive thoughts can also come from a hyper-awareness and a need to control and suppress one's thoughts, or high levels of stress or mental fatigue in somebody's life. So these are all, or it could be a normal cognitive noise that we go through. We have millions, thousands of thoughts on the daily that are just irrelevant or weird or whatever, and so we can't always pay mind to every single thing. So allowing it to pass by like a leaf on a stream sometimes can be really helpful, and remembering that we're not judging ourselves for what's coming up, especially when we can't even control it. So don't try to control it even more. because it's just not going to work. And then you're going to need more and more and more and more from these compulsions to provide relief, but they don't. Now, let's talk about a little debate. It's not really a debate, and I want to ask Zach about it, but so I was reading the article, and this is where it gets kind of iffy. It said that sometimes treatment will consist of stopping somebody from praying, and I don't like that.
Like, what does that accomplish?
It stops them from the compulsion of prayer.
Well, I feel like if you are at a point where praying is causing you that much distress, maybe for a day or two, avoid it. But long term, prayer is the answer.
I think we should stop someone from using prayer as the thing that covers your sins.
That's fair.
Allowing God to move in the prayer as being the one to cover. I think that's where it gets. I don't think we should stop people from praying. I think we should stop them from that core belief of I'm praying to cover my sins, and that's why I'm praying 100,000 times.
That's very true. Maybe rewire their brain on the way that, or what they believe prayer is.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about cognitive behavioral therapy. It's like getting to the core of the issues, like the core beliefs you're having, and then restructuring them. And that's where religious work can come in, like the Bible, to remind you of you don't have as much control as you think you do. Or, you know what I mean?
Definitely. And no prayer is better than any other prayer, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. So I don't think that you should be only, like, but it does say pray without ceasing. But what I think pray without ceasing means is always holding a heart posture toward God all day long.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I think because we can't live our lives productively like the Proverbs 31 woman. She's not praying every second of every day, which I think she's just a good example of how I want to one day live my life. But I mean, I can't. I'll try, but it's hard. Didn't she cook? And she got up early. She got up early.
Well, that's just the ideal. We're all working towards it.
Yeah, somebody told me I can be a Proverbs 32 woman for now. Wait, but that's non-existent. Yeah. All right, you guys. Today we talked about a lot. We talked about OCD, intrusive thoughts, how to heal. We talked about the underlying core beliefs of OCD. We talked about religious OCD. We talked about just a lot of different topics in here. We learned that it's not about our own doing, and that it's about the Lord's, and that if we release our control to Him and we ask Him to help us face our fears, then He will. He'll be the one. Only He can. Only He can do it. Only He can defeat the things that you go through internally. OCD is an internal cycle of torture, and I don't want you to ever think that I'm saying that you're doing anything wrong, because I hope that what you got from this message was that it is, a lot of it's out of your control, and that's the thing. You're trying to fix it. And I believe that the problem could be psychological, but the solution has to be spiritual, and that's why we formed Psalms and Psychology.
Amen. Clip it. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
We love you guys.
All right. Bye.
Peace.